You're not a failure. You're under a spell. A spell cast by faces, digits, and achievements that will never know your wounds. Every time you compare yourself to someone who made it, you're not seeking inspiration. You're punishing yourself for still being human. The result is invisible but devastating. You stop seeing yourself. Your identity doesn't die all at once, but rots quietly, buried under filtered lives, corporate redemption speeches, and algorithms that turn pain into content. With every like that doesn't come, every effortless success you scroll past, you fade a little more. What remains? A shell on autopilot, chasing validation like a starving dog sniffing for emotional crumbs. This video won't motivate you, it will exercise you. You were taught to believe that comparison is healthy, that aiming at the successful is noble, but that's a lie sold as virtue. The raw truth is that systematic comparison with those who won in a broken system is slow, emotional suicide. You never see the cost, only the trophy. Never the guilt, only the spotlight. Modern meritocracy is not a ladder, it's a treadmill powered by guilt. The faster you run, the further you feel from yourself. There is no empathy in the showcase, no mercy in the feed, only voices whispering that you're not enough, not ready, too late. Comparison has become a silent cult of self-erasure. Picture a mirror that only reflects the parts of you that you hate the most. Now imagine waking up every day and facing that mirror as if it were truth. That's how people live when they lose themselves to comparison. The brutal image is not of someone failing, but of someone who no longer recognizes themselves. Because when you compare yourself to someone who made it, what you're really seeing is your own absence amplified. It's as if someone else's success is screaming your shortcomings at full volume. But the problem isn't the volume, it's the void. The internal void that comparison deepens every day until only an echo remains. An echo that repeats, "You're not enough," until it becomes law, identity, sentence. And why does it hurt more now? Because we are living in the era of emotional collapse disguised as personal branding. It has never been easier to look invincible, and never more devastating to feel irrelevant. The current collapse isn't just financial, it's symbolic. The reference points that once shaped identity, work, success, aesthetics, are crumbling. In desperation, we cling to the only metric still alive: comparison, followers, output, engagement. Human value has become a KPI, and in that metric, no one wins. Only the system does. I speak because I was that shadow, I was that absence. I spent years comparing myself to people who didn't even know I existed, punishing myself for not following the right timing, for not being more like them. Until one day I smashed the mirror, and in place of the distorted image, I saw something I hadn't seen in a long time. Presence. I was still there. Scarred, yes, but whole enough to return. This video is about that return. Violent, solitary, necessary. Since childhood, you've been trained to measure yourself by someone else's ruler. First came report cards and selective applause. Then, the subtle comparisons between siblings, cousins, neighbors. Every compliment to someone else was a silent criticism of you. The scale was never fair, but you learned to obey it anyway. You grew up believing that being enough meant being measured, and that only what stood above average had value. As an adult, you traded toys for titles, cartoons for dashboards, but the mechanism remained. You still compare yourself to know if you deserve to exist. What once was healthy self-critique turned into a blade pressed permanently against your chest. And the worst part? You no longer notice, because the voice that punishes you today isn't yours. It's the echo of 1,000 glances that once measured you. That voice lives deep. It doesn't shout, it whispers. It says you're behind, that you're not smart enough, not productive enough, not valuable enough. It wakes you before the alarm and keeps you up long after. You hear it every time you scroll and feel ashamed of yourself. And the more you strive to improve, the stronger it grows. Because it doesn't want your growth, it wants your depletion. It doesn't want you to evolve. It wants you to break while trying. This voice makes you believe you're evaluating yourself when in truth, you're slowly annihilating who you are in pursuit of a standard that was never yours. This isn't self-awareness, it's self-harm dressed in productivity. The system thrives on your pain. It's fuel. When you feel inadequate, you buy. When you feel behind, you speed up. When you feel small, you show off. The market doesn't want you to accept yourself. It wants you to endlessly self-correct. Self-critique became an emotional production tool, and the harder you try to make it, the further away it gets. Because the destination was never peace, it was performance. The emotional collapse caused by comparison isn't a bug, it's the product. The cruelest part? You became complicit. You learned to criticize yourself before anyone else could, to sabotage yourself before anyone judged you, to laugh at yourself before anyone laughed. You don't just compare yourself to others, you compare yourself to an idealized version that will never exist. A high-performance hologram built by advertising, reinforced by social media, tattooed onto your self-worth as a non-negotiable destiny. Every real mistake becomes punishment for not being the myth. Every slow step feels like failure. Every pause feels like cowardice. And you keep going, judging yourself for not being a fictional character. Understand this. As long as that voice remains your compass, you will never find home. Because it doesn't point to your center, it points to the abyss. And with each step forward, you convince yourself that falling is progress. But it's not. It's surrender disguised as effort. It's burnout dressed up as ambition. It's emotional suicide with quarterly milestones. You don't live for yourself anymore. You live to feed a version of yourself that was never born. A projection. The ideal you who always wins, who always knows, who never fails. But that character doesn't feel fear, doesn't feel doubt, doesn't feel anything. It's a hologram, made of likes, validation, and status. And like all projections, it demands sacrifice. You wake up each day not to exist, but to perform, not to feel, but to sustain the brand. Your identity has become a campaign. You've become the manager of yourself, manager of an emotional brand that can't fail, can't pause, can't break down. And every time you fail, you feel guilt. Every time you pause, you feel shame. Every time you breathe, you feel behind. The hologram demands, and you obey. This ideal version wasn't born from your essence. It was born from your fear. The fear of being rejected, excluded, erased. And the system exploited that fear perfectly. It turned self-esteem into branding, turned vulnerability into engagement content, taught you how to monetize even your wounds, as long as they're well-edited, well-framed, and well-received. The problem? You began to care more about the narrative than the truth. You started measuring your worth against lives that are just as false as the one you're trying to fabricate. And in doing so, something essential was lost. The right to be imperfect. The right to be invisible. The right to exist without performance. What's left when you spend your life maintaining a character who was never you? Exhaustion, not physical fatigue, symbolic depletion. You're tired of pretending, but you're afraid to stop. Because stopping would mean admitting it was all an illusion. That you don't want what you're chasing, that you have nothing left to prove. But until you stop, you're just a shadow. A shadow of yourself. A shadow of others. A shadow of a marketing promise that will never be fulfilled. The cost of living to win is dying without ever knowing who you were. There's something even more vicious. Over time, you begin to hate who you actually are. Because constant comparison has warped your view so much that your real self feels like an obstacle to your ideal self. Your essence becomes the enemy. Your authenticity, a burden. You start amputating parts of yourself just to fit the character. You censor thoughts, hide emotions, recalibrate desires. And worse, you start judging those who don't do the same. Oppressed, you become the oppressor. Wounded, you become a machine. The borrowed identity demands that you abandon your humanity, and you agree, in exchange for scraps of approval. But here's the truth no one told you. The more you compare, the more you vanish. Because comparison doesn't bring you closer to who you admire. It drives you further from who you are. And if that distance isn't faced, it becomes a void. A void where your soul goes silent so the persona can scream. Where your real story is erased so the edited narrative can survive. But there's a cost. There always is. The emptiness, the insomnia, the constant unease of not knowing who's living your life anymore. There comes a moment when the mask begins to crack, and it's not glorious, it's not cinematic, it's not loud, it's quiet, shameful, devastating. You don't collapse on stage. You collapse in the bathroom, in the car, in the endless scroll at 3 a.m. The pain comes without soundtrack, without applause, without comfort. You start to forget who the character was and what's left of you beneath it. The body sends signals. The soul begs for mercy. But you keep going, because you were trained to believe that stopping is failing. And in the world of comparison, failure is vanishing. The collapse begins when you realize you've already vanished, even while trying to win. The comparison that used to push you now devours you. You find yourself staring at random profiles for hours, as if searching for something you lost. But what you lost isn't out there. It's inside. Forgotten, silenced, traumatized by years of performance. Rage begins to build, not rage at others, but at yourself. For believing, for conforming, for shrinking to fit into a mold never made for humans. You feel ashamed of not having made it. But deep down, a new suspicion begins to form. Maybe making it never existed. Maybe everyone is faking. And if that's true, then everything collapses. The game loses meaning. The race loses its finish line. The mask loses the face it once held. And in that collapse, something finally flickers. Truth. In the heart of despair, a question begins to rise. One you've avoided your whole life. Who would I be if I didn't have to prove anything? That question hurts, because it forces you to face the parts of you that were exiled. The fragile parts, the slow ones, the uncertain, unproductive, deeply feeling parts. The parts that don't perform, but live. And you realize that to truly see yourself again, something must die. The persona, the projection, the ideal. Only then can you be born again. Raw, imperfect, real. Most people never cross that threshold. Most go back. They recalibrate the mask. They post more content. They run faster. Because facing yourself without the filter of performance is like staring into a dirty mirror and deciding to clean it with your own tears. But something has shifted. You can't go back. Because now the pain of pretending outweighs the pain of being real. And that's when something changes. Not from the outside in, but from the inside out. A rupture, a spark of presence, still fragile, still trembling, but alive. This collapse isn't the end. It's the beginning of your return. A return that promises no glory, no applause, no validation. But it promises something you haven't felt in years. Integrity. The feeling that, for the first time, you can stop running and simply exist. Feel. Be. Breathe without apologizing. That is the real success. Not being the best, but being whole. You begin to see yourself. Not as you wish you were, not as you once imagined, but as you are. And at first it's terrifying, because the reflection that returns from the mirror is imperfect, tired, marked by years of hiding. But it's yours. For the first time in a long while, you sense someone is truly there. Not a persona, not a performance, a presence, breathing, feeling, existing. This is your soul coming back from exile, and it doesn't want metrics. It wants truth. It doesn't want applause. It wants shelter. The reconstruction begins with a brutal act. Accepting that you don't need to become someone else to deserve to be here. Accepting that your raw self, with everything it carries, is already enough. In the silence after the collapse, you start hearing voices that were once drowned out by constant self-criticism. Internal voices, legitimate desires, suppressed instincts, quiet callings. And as you begin to hear them, you realize something profound. Beneath the comparison, there was always hunger. Hunger to belong. Hunger to be seen. Hunger to feel enough. But now you understand. No external validation will ever satisfy that need. Because the emptiness born of comparison cannot be filled with more approval. It only dissolves when you stop fighting who you are. When you stop amputating parts of yourself just to win admiration from people who never really look into your eyes. Slowly, you begin to reclaim yourself. Reclaim your story, your pain, your pauses. You understand that you don't need to accelerate to be real. That your identity isn't found in outcomes, but in the quiet decisions you make when no one's watching. The return is not linear. There are days when the mask tries to come back. But now you can see it. And when it reappears, you don't feed it. You observe. Because now someone is there to observe. Someone who feels, who recognizes, who stays. That someone is you. Unfiltered. You also begin to protect yourself. Not by isolating, but by building emotional boundaries. You now know that certain spaces, certain feeds, certain people exist only to reactivate the wound of comparison. And for the first time, you choose not to submit. You close the app. You slow down. You breathe. You realize that comparing yourself to those who made it is like staring at the sky while bleeding, poetic, but useless. What heals is the ground, the reality, the here, the now, presence. This return is lonely, but not empty. Because as you reconnect with your presence, you become able to see others too. Not as competitors, not as icons, but as legitimate mirrors. Each fighting their own battles, hiding behind masks, trying to survive the same culture that almost killed you from the inside. And something shifts. You stop comparing and start connecting, not to idealized versions, but to real, breathing presences. And that is freedom. You've spent too long seeing yourself through other people's eyes. Too long trying to earn your right to exist. Now it's time to break. Not with the world, but with the illusion the world sold you about who you are. Break with the idea that your worth depends on performance. With the silent belief that you only deserve love when you're winning. You don't need to run anymore. You don't need to explain. Presence is enough. The simple fact that you're still here, still breathing, still feeling, still fighting, is the beginning of your return. And return is ritual. It doesn't happen all at once. It begins when you look inward with clean eyes. When you silence the noise and feel your body. When you say, even trembling, I'm still here. You won't win every day. You don't have to. That's the new pact. You are not a high-performance project. You are a human in process. And that process demands presence, not perfection. Those who compared you, shaped you, amputated you, they were lost too. They worshipped holograms. They chased myths. They didn't know they were dying of comparison while smiling at the camera. But now you know. Now you've seen. And once you've seen, you don't go back to sleep. Now hear this. Every time you feel the urge to compare, stop, breathe. Return to your body. Return to what is, to what's real. Compare less, connect more, observe more, judge less, and most of all, honor every part of yourself that survived the silent war of self-criticism. They are sacred. They carried you here. They are your ground. This video wasn't a lesson. It was a mirror. And if you saw something in it that hurt, it means something in you is still alive. Something that wants to come back. Something that's been screaming in the dark. I'm still here. That scream is your rebirth. Mark it. And if you can, share this path. Because there are millions disappearing into themselves in silence, punishing themselves for not being success holograms. There are millions vanishing in pursuit of approval. Let this video find them. Let it remind you, you were never a failure. You were just exiled. Return, feel, breathe, and finally, be. If this mirror cut deep, leave a symbol in the comments. Not to explain, to claim presence. Share it with someone who needs to return. Subscribe. The war is invisible, but you are not alone.